My mom was what you'd call a single mother. She got pregnant with me when she was just 19 and ended up being an unmarried mom. Naturally, I've never seen my dad's face, nor heard his name. There were people in the past who spoke ill of my mom for getting pregnant so young and not being able to reveal who the father was.
Poor thing.
They would say, and some pitied me too. But I've never felt sorry for myself or thought of my life as unfortunate. Sure, we were poor, and there were times I felt the inconvenience of not having a dad, but I'm truly grateful to have been born to my mom, who always thought of me and raised me with such care. So, when I was old enough to work, wanting to repay my mom felt like a natural progression. I remember telling her as she jiggled jobs at a bakery in the morning and a diner at night to save up for my high school fees, I will get a job after graduating middle school. Of course, she objected. These days, most people go on to high school, and dropping out after middle school equates to a tough life. That is the general perception. Although I thought the same back then, I just wanted to make my mom happy as soon as possible. I couldn't see that going to high school would ease her worries. I decided that the best way to honor her was to start working as soon as possible and give her a break from her endless job. Stubborn and action-oriented, I ignored my mom's pleas and immediately started job hunting. Finding a company to hire a middle school graduate wasn't easy, and the pay was expectedly low, but I needed a decent income to ease my mom's burden. After searching for about half a year post-graduation, I landed on a job in New York. It was far from our hometown, so I would live in company housing. My mom worried a lot about me, asking,
Are you really okay? Can you manage living alone? Why don't you stay with me without worrying about money?
Even as I was about to leave, she kept saying things like that. Don't worry, Mom, I'm fine. I said, happy and optimistic about finally being able to get back to her, not realizing the tough and challenging days that lay ahead. With a carefree smile, I left my mom and started my new life in New York. My salary was $2,000 a month after taxes. For a middle school graduate, this amount was the best I could find. Moreover, I heard that with hard work, I could get a speedy promotion regardless of my years of service, so I was highly motivated. But that was just a pipe dream. For 5 years, since starting work at 15, I worked earnestly, but at 20, my salary had barely changed. I worked from 7 a.m. every day, often returning home on the last train, and it wasn't uncommon to be called in on my days off. If I didn't respond immediately, I'd get reprimanded for lack of motivation. Despite all this, there was no overtime pay or extra for working on holidays, a true black company. I even worked while feeling dizzy from fever, as taking a day off wasn't allowed. When I got berated by my boss during one of those feverish days, I realized just how bad the company was, but I didn't have an option to quit. It was nearly impossible for someone with only a middle school education like me to find a better paying job. As I got older, I understood more about what I could realistically achieve. Now, still chased by rent and only able to give my mom a small amount of money, I couldn't afford to earn less. I want to make life easier for Mom. With that sole purpose, I continued working at this black company. Being far from my hometown, I had no friends, nor did I have any close colleagues due to the age gap. Without anyone to confide in, I gradually wore myself out, unnoticed. Then one day, something happened. It was my day off, but as usual, I was called in and didn't get home until 9 p.m. I was so tired I wanted to sleep immediately, but the thought of waking up to another day of work was unbearable. I didn't want to do anything. Looking back, I was probably exhausted mentally. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, an unusual occurrence since no one ever visited me, and I wasn't expecting anything from my mom. When I opened the door, there stood a woman in her 40s, a stranger to me. "May I help you?" I asked.
I've just moved in next door. My name is Johnson. This is just a little something,
she said, handing me a box of sweets. "Oh, thank you." I was a bit taken aback, as this was a first in my 5 years of living alone. But Mrs. Johnson's gentle demeanor and her saying,
Come on, Tyler, say hello,
as a middle school-age boy emerged from behind her, made me feel a bit warmer inside.
Nice to meet you.
Tyler, in a shy and somewhat awkward manner, said in a voice that had just started to change. Seeing him like that reminded me of my younger self. It was a feeling I couldn't quite describe, nostalgic, as if I was seeing my own past with my mom. I'm Smith. Nice to meet you too, I greeted them, and the mother and son left with a smile. Eating the sweets they gave me was the only time I could forget the unpleasantness of my job. Yet, inevitably, the next day would always come as usual. The unreasonable scoldings and working from morning till night without overtime pay continued in the black company. However, the one change was having the Johnson family next door. Just exchanging greetings with them when I left for work, or on the rare days off, somehow felt soothing, a strange sensation. One day, coming back from work in the evening, I saw Mrs. Johnson alone, struggling up the stairs with a bag of rice and groceries. Without thinking, I offered to help and said, "Let me carry those for you." Mrs. Johnson looked surprised, then thanked me with a smile. After we finished climbing the stairs,
Tyler never does such kind things, so you surprised me. Thank you.
she said in a teasing tone. Hearing that, I blurted out, "At that age, even if he wants to be kind to his mom, he might be too shy to show it. I bet he really wants to do something nice for you in his heart." It was how I truly felt, having been the same during my middle school years. Mrs. Johnson responded,
Thank you for saying that. I'm a single mother, so I always worry if Tyler feels lonely.
saying to me, I had suspected it, but hearing that they were also a family of two made me think of my own situation. I couldn't help but say, the number of parents doesn't matter. Even if it's half the amount of people, a mother's love comes through. He's grateful. I know because I also grew up with just my mom. Tears welled up in Mrs. Johnson's eyes. Then,
Thank you so much.
she said, I hadn't done much, but I was glad to have made her happy. Gradually, Tyler and I grew closer. He initially was shy, but eventually opened up, and we would go to each other's homes and play games sometimes. I never had a brother, but he felt like one. Mrs. Johnson even started bringing me dinner sometimes. My lonely life in New York, which I had endured for 5 years, began to regain its color. When I told my mom about them over the phone, she was delighted.
I'm so relieved you have kind people around you. I'll have to go to New York to meet them.
The idea of my mom coming to greet them at my age was a bit embarrassing, but I was happy thinking about my beloved Johnson family getting along with her. The days that once held no joy were slowly changing. But one morning, as I was leaving for work, the door of the neighboring house burst open, and Tyler, still in his pajamas, came running out. "Good morning," I started to say, but then I noticed something was wrong with Tyler. He blurted out something unexpected.
My mom has collapsed. What should I do?
His face looked like he was about to burst into tears as he clung to me. I immediately went into the Johnson's house to check on Mrs. Johnson and found her collapsed on the floor, unconscious. It was my first time encountering someone in such a state, and I was scared and shocked. But seeing Tyler crying and panicking, I knew I had to do something. I called an ambulance and explained the situation to the paramedics. Accompanying the distraught Tyler to the hospital, he seemed to finally calm down a bit.
Smith, I'm sorry for keeping you from work. If she's gone,
He said, tears streaming down his face. I couldn't leave him alone in that state. The thought of my own mom suddenly collapsing filled me with fear and dread. While waiting for Mrs. Johnson's treatment, I asked Tyler to wait a moment and hurriedly called my office. I hadn't had a chance to call earlier, and it was well past my start time. Despite explaining the situation over the phone, as I expected, my boss didn't understand.
Sounds like a silly excuse a high school dropout would make. If you don't want to work, don't bother coming back.
My boss said, "It's not a lie. I'm really at the hospital." I tried to explain repeatedly, but my boss just got angrier. Finally,
Stop pretending to be a good guy. You just hate your worthless self and want to skip work.
he yelled and hung up on me.
Smith, are you okay?
Tyler asked, having overheard my boss's loud voice. "Yeah, don't worry about it," I replied. I'd try to explain in person later. But right now, I was more worried about Mrs. Johnson and Tyler. Just then, the doctor came out of the treatment room. It turned out Mrs. Johnson had suffered a sudden brain-related illness and could have been in danger if the treatment was delayed. Fortunately, she was treated quickly, so her life wasn't in danger, and she would be able to return to her normal life after some time in the hospital.
That's great. Really great.
Tyler said, crying. Seeing him, I felt tears welling up in my eyes too. I realized then how much I had come to see the Johnsons as part of my own family. I deeply wished for Mrs. Johnson's quick recovery and for their return to happy, smiling days. However, a few days later, an unexpected and distressing event happened to me. Demotion and transfer to a rural area. Can't you reconsider this? I was not only facing demotion and a pay cut, but also being transferred to a small town. The reason given was my poor work attitude. But apart from a recent hospital incident, I hadn't been late or absent in 5 years. I had diligently followed all the rules of this black company. Such a severe punishment for just one incident seemed incredibly unfair. But my boss only yelled,
You should be thankful you're not fired for making up such a stupid lie and skipping work.
He wouldn't listen to anything I had to say. With this transfer, my salary would drop by more than $500. This would make it extremely difficult to continue sending money to my mom. Despite working faithfully for 5 years, it felt so unjust to end up like this. Yet, if asked whether I regretted my actions that day, the answer was no. The Johnson family meant that much to me. So, it looks like I'll have to reduce the money I send for a while, but I'll figure something out, I said to my mom over the phone, feeling incredibly frustrated and embarrassed. I didn't want to make such a disheartening report. But
Don't talk like that. What you did for your neighbors, that's far more wonderful than just going to work on time. I'm so proud to have a son like you.
my mom said, trying hard not to let her hear the tears in my voice. I quickly ended the call. Then, unexpectedly, I received a call from an unknown number. Tentatively answering, I was surprised to find it was the secretary of the CEO of a large corporation I had no prior involvement with. Initially thinking it was a wrong number, I was puzzled but agreed to meet the next day at the company's headquarters, as they knew my name and wanted to talk. I was nervous entering a grand building I had never set foot in before. But as soon as I stepped into the CEO's office and heard the first words, all my tension disappeared, replaced by utter shock.
I am Emily Johnson's father. Thank you sincerely for saving my daughter's life the other day. Words cannot express my gratitude.
What? Emily Johnson, who lived next door, turned out to be the daughter of a big company CEO. I had never heard about her parents before and never imagined her father being such an influential figure. It emerged that after conflicts with her parents during her marriage, she had divorced and been living as a single mother. Although they hadn't been in contact for almost a decade, the recent incident led to the hospital informing her father, and they reconciled. When Emily spoke to her father about me,
If you are willing, would you consider working for our company? I've heard about your commitment to your own family and am impressed by your character. Having someone like you on our team would be wonderful for our company. Of course, I assure you that your salary will be higher than what you currently earn.
he made an unexpected proposal. This was overwhelming for a 20-year-old high school dropout like me. I couldn't imagine what I could possibly contribute to such a large corporation. But for the first time, I felt truly valued and needed. After much thought, I accepted the CEO's generous offer and his daughter's gratitude. I turned down the transfer from my old job and started working for Emily's father's company. The new job had normal working hours, a 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., with minimal overtime that was always compensated, and 2 days off a week with no work calls on my days off. Is this what a normal work life is supposed to be like? For me, who had worked at a black company since I was 15, these days feel like heaven. And about my previous company, it turns out it was actually a subsidiary of my current employer. Emily Johnson's father, outraged upon learning about my mistreatment, dissolved the subsidiary. Following an evaluation, only the diligent employees were rehired at the parent company, and unsurprisingly, my old boss wasn't among them. These days remind me how abnormal my previous work situation was. Now, I find daily satisfaction in my work, surrounded by colleagues with whom I can share thoughts and feelings, living happier days. I continue to send money to my mom, and I've started enjoying life more, going out with friends, buying stylish clothes, and spending on myself. I've learned that having personal fulfillment allows me to better cherish those around me. Though I've moved a bit away from the Johnson family, we still keep in touch. Tyler, inspired by our bond, has begun to think more about how to be kind to his mom, and I've been there to advise him. It's like seeing a younger version of myself, and I can't help but be involved. My deepest wish is for my mom, Tyler, and his mom to always be happy and smiling. That's what I sincerely hope for.